Welcome to the Convos Cultural Update. We have a special treat for you with an interview of another great Convos artist, the extraordinary jazz percussionist, prolific band leader, in-demand producer, and world-class educator, Ulysses Owens Jr. Born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, trained at Juilliard, where he is also now on the faculty for jazz studies, Ulysses Owens Jr. is a powerhouse performer who has played with the greats, vocalist Dee Dee Bridgewater, band leader and trumpet player Wynton Marsalis, band leader and bass player Christian McBride, and many, many others. Convo's audiences got a double dose of Ulysses Owens Jr. during the 2017-2018 season, as he was here with the 14-year-old jazz phenom Joey Alexander in October of 2017, and then he returned in April of 2018 with his project, Songs of Freedom, which featured the amazing vocalists Alicia Olatuja, Theo Bleckman, and Joanna Majoko. We recently caught up with Ulysses in Jacksonville during a break from a summer camp that he and his family's Don't Miss a Beat Foundation run for the children in their community. Check it out. All right, Ulysses, hello. Great to have you with us.
Glad to be here, man.
Well, we are in a series of interviews with artists who have been to Purdue and are thrilled to have this chance to talk to you and hear what you are up to these days. And so I know that we had to fit this interview in amongst some summer camp work that you're doing. Yeah. So what's going on? What are the students up to?
Man, so I don't know if you know much about my family's foundation, but about 12 years ago, we started something called Don't Miss a Beat. And it's basically a performing arts organization. It's for what I like to call at hope kids. I hate the word at risk and I hate the word inner city. So these are what I like to call at hope kids. And it's basically an organization that we provide free arts programming, homework assistance, and we are a village to these families. We have actively probably about 100 kids that we work with throughout the school year. And what we've started this year for the first time is our summer camp intensive. Normally it's just a summer camp with 100 kids, and by the end of the 6 weeks, we do a Broadway junior musical. Last year, we did Once on This Island Junior.
Right.
This year, because of COVID and all the social distancing, we actually scaled it down, and we have about 60 kids, and we have them staggered. So we have our one age group coming from 8 to 11, 30, and then the other age group comes in from 12 to 5 or whatever. And so we will do a performance this year. We'll do a cabaret. And we'll have to, stagger out our audiences. So anyway, I'm artistic director for all of that. So I've been honestly working since really the beginning of COVID, March, with my staff and just deciding how are we going to do this? Because one minute they were saying, we're going to do camp. Next minute they were saying they're not. And obviously, I'm sure you've been reading the headlines. I'm actually in Jacksonville, Florida right now, which means our numbers have not been great. They've been going up. And so we really have to make sure that we're operating by CDC guidelines and all that. So anyway, that's one half of what I'm doing. The other half, I'm excited that I released a brush book with Hal Leonard in the last couple of weeks. It's called Jazz Brushes for the Modern Drummer, an essential guide to the art of keeping time. And it's really the first ever kind of, I would say, kind of chronicled book about brush players going all the way back to the early 1900s. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. And then just, really staying positive during COVID and kind of shifting gears. We're used to, as jazz musicians, being on the road. And now it's like, wow, I can finally be home and do all the stuff I've been saying for years. I want to be home. So that's a little bit of what I'm going through. But I'm actually enjoying, I don't enjoy the reason, but I'm enjoying being home. I said in my blog recently, this is the first time I've been in one city for more than a month in over 15 years. So, so it's like, I don't have to worry about being on the plane tomorrow. So it's actually been great to work on a lot of long-term goals that I've been, that's just been there. So.
Well, I think about the early days when I was trying to pick up guitar and there wasn't an internet.
Yeah.
And so I think about now all of the resources that are available to aspiring musicians or aspiring anybody. There is so much content available that can help you chunk through these so much more quickly. And so, I've watched a number of your videos, your educational videos and product demos. And I think people could be so genuinely inspired and see masters at work. And so I'm curious what kind of feedback you get out of those kinds of channels.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I think, one of the things that I try to do, and this will tie into feedback, is I really try to make whatever lesson or blog, whatever I do, accessible. And so I think the feedback that I've been getting is, man, thank you so much for finally, laying out a concept. And I feel like I understand it now. Like I started a recent video series on Instagram called 60 Seconds with You. And it's because I've been getting all these, direct messages and emails about topics, because I think there's a lot of information, to your point. But I think sometimes we as musicians, we don't present things in an accessible way. Sometimes we present it from the perspective of, oh, we know how to do this and we've been doing it for years, as opposed to there's somebody that loves what you do who does not have your talent, who may not even have an opportunity to get where you're going, but how can you present something that they can learn from you? And I think that is what social media has done. It's made it's kind of erased the barriers. And now you've got people who are picking up an instrument for the first time, coming onto our Instagram saying, teach me something.
Right.
So to your point, I think that's the feedback I've been getting, is like, I know I'm not on the level where you are in terms of a professional touring musician, but how can you help me to get better? And I think that is in general what I get a lot, because now people can get to us much easier, much easier, I should say.
Well, that's great. I know that you've got to be an inspiration. I find it inspirational just to watch. I'm not a percussionist, but I find the way in which you communicate and talk about it, you're working at the meta level as well as the technical level. That's
Thank
great.
you. Thank you, man. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the role of the percussionist inside ensembles. I mean, you've worked with an amazing collection of individuals, and so it's a true honor for us to talk to you about this, because whether it's Wynton Marsalis or Dee Dee Bridgewater, Christian McBride, but even people like outside of what the traditional jazz world of Renee Fleming, but Kurt Elling, all these other great. You played with so many folks, and so the role that you play shifts so much depending upon whether I know there's like, if you're on somebody else's gig and they head it up, or if it's your gig and you're driving, but yet, let's talk about that sort of shifting of roles and the adaptability and collaboration that's needed when you're behind the kit or whatever you're doing. How does that work for you? What's your sort of philosophy on how you shift roles and can lead from where you play?
Sure. I mean, my first philosophy, and I teach this in every drum lesson, I always say to drummers, ask them, what is our role? And they, some say, oh, to play and to this and to hold down, whatever. And I say, our primary role as drummers are to be timekeepers, right? So whether you talk about John Bonham, or you talk about Buddy Rich, or you talk about, Philly Joe Jones, or you talk about, Zigaboo Modeles, like anybody, no matter the style, our job is to hold the time together. So to your point, I think that's what my job is when I play with Miss Fleming, or when I, get on the bandstand with Wynton or with McBride or whomever. They want me to hold it together. And I don't care how highly recommended I come. If I do not, make the beat something stable that they can do what they do on, and also be sensitive to their needs, then they don't want me. They're going to hire someone else. So I think that's the first thing, is the timekeeping piece. And then I think second, Derry, to your point of being adaptive, is what are their individual needs? So for instance, when I was playing with Miss Fleming, I was actually called by Wynton to do this recording, and she was actually really, first of all, she was incredible to work with, but she was very, I don't want to use the word insecure, but she was very timid because she was doing some jazz pieces. And so she was like, guys, please be patient with me, and I'm like, well, please, we're honored to just be in the same room, And I think, so what I knew then was I had to hold the band together, but I had to also cater to what Wynton needed, because he had written these arrangements. And then I also had to really make her feel like there was a nice palette up under her, while also not getting in her way and not making her feel like she had to shout, versus with McBride wants all of you to show up on the bandstand. He does not, like, if you're not, like, my thing with McBride is you either go big or you go home, right? Because he's going to play every part of his soul, and every part of his being is in that bass and every note. And if you're not matching him, it's just not going to be the experience he wants. So I would say I've been big on like learning what everybody needs, and that comes from discerning. It also comes from just observing them, and then also kind of what you talked about earlier, researching them. Before McBride called me, I'd already listened to all his records. Miss Fleming, I listened to a good part of her collection as well. So I think, yes, first timekeeping, and then being very sensitive to whatever the individual needs are based on what you know about that artist. So those are some of the things that help me to be adaptive. But then also, I would say, lastly, is being willing to be adaptive. You have a lot of musicians who are very focused on, this is what I do, this is how I play. And that's just never been my career. I've always gotten the call because I've been the guy willing to do whatever for the gig, in terms of musically. So, I think that helps people feel like they can create what they want to create when they have a team of people that are willing to adjust.
Yeah, well, that's great. So you mentioned, Buddy Rich, Philly Joe Jones, and all of these great players. Tell me about how if someone said, what's your lineage as a percussionist? What's the family tree like for you? Yeah. How do you describe that?
Well, first, that's a great question. And I love how you articulated that lineage. First, I would tell you is gospel drummers. I started playing drums at 2 years old in the Black Pentecostal church. So I would say all those drummers that come from that style, and this is not what gospel is now. Gospel now might as well be a pop gig. This is, when the band in gospel was a B3 Hammond organ and a drummer, and every now and then a bass guitarist. So my lineage began with, church gospel drummers. Then I would say probably around the time, about 12, 13, I got exposed to Dave Walkle and Dennis Chambers. So then I started understanding about fusion and all that. Then it was Buddy Rich. And then I would say when the real jazz vocabulary started getting built was probably 16, I got exposed to Miles Davis's Milestones record. And that was when everything changed for me. So I would say my lineage really starts with the sort of soul music. Also my father listened to a lot of old R&B records. So, hearing drummers that I got to know later, which were Bernard Purdie, Al Jackson Jr., Uriel Jones, all those guys, which I learned about, but I didn't know, but they were kind of in my ear. And then my mom is a huge church person, she's really in the church. So then I was hearing all that. So, and then I sort of very much brought jazz into my life. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of the lineage.
Yeah. Man, there was a Bernard Purdie clip that's been circulating in fairly recent, in like the last year or so, and he's just in that groove and flying. It was really great to see some footage get spent on some time on him. Yeah, that's it's really awesome.
He's special. I got a chance. The trio, McBride's trio, we were on tour in Paris one time, and there's a really famous little club in the, I think it's the Le Châtelet area, kind of central Paris, and it's called Duc des Lombards, and a lot of bands play there, and it's kind of on the European circuit, especially if you're on a certain level where you're playing to an audience of under 200 people. Anyway, we happened to be playing one night, and Bernard Purdie was in town also. So Purdie comes into our sound check, and he and McBride are really good friends, and he just starts talking stuff to everybody. And he literally spends the whole night with us. He has dinner with us, and then he sits in both sets. It was the biggest education ever to be hanging with him. It was beautiful. So you talk about Bernard. I have a real big soft spot for him because he's so gracious.
That's understandable. So, how about that? We didn't know it was going to go there, but awesome.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I think we would be really remiss if we didn't talk about Songs of Freedom, which was the project that you had here at Purdue. And, I'd be curious to say, obviously our national discourse right now is one of great concern. And so many of us are wrestling with all kinds of questions and desires to act. And there are just so many questions. Right. I'm curious, this project was started several years ago for you as you were putting it together, and you had a fairly expansive, at least to my way of thinking, a fairly expansive idea of the notion of freedom inside your construction based on the types of songs, because I'll remind our listeners that it included songs sung by Nina Simone, Abby Lincoln, and Joni Mitchell, and you assembled this amazing team to put it together. So, but this was your project, and sort of how did you send yourself into this? What were you trying to accomplish in that project?
Cool. So first thing was Jason O'Lane from Jazz and Lincoln Center called me and said, "Hey, we're celebrating 100 years of song, and we love your musical direction work. So we want you to take 1960s to current times." And I think at that time it may have been 2000, maybe 15 or 16. And so I said, okay, first of all, I wasn't alive half of that period. So, what am I supposed to do? So, but I had done a lot of studying of music from the 60s, and a lot of what I had been influenced by was from that era. So the first thing I said was, well, I'm going to, instead of focusing on trying to do like a, round robin or top 40 of that era, I want to take 3 singers. I had always been in love with Nina Simone. I'd always been in love with Abby and even Joni. And I knew I always wanted to do something with Nina and Abby. Like I always knew like the two of them were very interconnected to me. So anyway, when Jason called, I was like, I think I'm going to just focus on the 60s because all of those singers influenced everything that came after. So I was like, all right, cool. 1. 2, I want to do something with Nina and Abby. And then I said, well, I need to get kind of a third energy in there that is a little bit more neutral because Nina and Abby is pedal to the metal, right? So I thought about Joni because Joni's music is something that's so recognizable. So that was kind of, all right, point 2. Then I said, I want to create a theme. And also at that time, Ferguson had just happened. Mike Brown had been brutally killed. You also had the guy in New York, the first I Can't Breathe. That is escaping me. You also had Alton Sterling, Stefan, a lot of different people. So it was kind of not what it is now, but the sort of police brutality thing was ramping up. And so I was like, man, we're all fighting for freedom. You also at that time had a lot of the LGBTQ agenda really coming to the front page as well, for marriage and all that. So it was a lot of people fighting for stuff. So I said, man, what if I created Songs of Freedom? And we can kind of, because I'm not a guy that's very political, and I don't like to use my artistic voice to piss people off. That's just not, I don't think that's my lane. I think there are people who are incredibly brilliant and that is their lane. My lane is art. So I said, let me use this opportunity to create this project. And I was going to choose from Joni, songs about freedom, sang from Nina, and sang from Abby. Now, Joni was different because for me, I talked about her wanting freedom with and from love, right? And then Nina was angry with her freedom and took it. And then you had Abby who wrote her freedom, right? So that was kind of my concept in it, and it was really well and all that. Fast forward, what is so incredibly sad to me is that Songs of Freedom is relevant all over again, right? Because it was relevant then, and I mean, I remember having the concerts like I think yours and a few others when we did that tour, and people were coming up to me afterwards in tears. They were saying, I kind of thought this was going to be like one thing, and I was kind of nervous, but I end up feeling amazing at the end of it. In other words, I felt united, and that was really my goal. I didn't want it to be this, shame. Even when we do Mississippi Goddamn, we're not attacking anybody. Saying all that to say now, and looking at, George Floyd, and even I was earlier today watching CNN, Rashard Brooks and all that, it's really unfortunate. And I think that the initial purpose was to highlight the legacies of these 3 women and their work and the relevance of them creating work to society then. Now to me is healing, and that's what we still need. So I think first it was an artistic and kind of pseudo-political statement through art. Now it's becoming, man, we need something to bring us together, because now everybody's finally, the covers have been pulled off completely.
Right.
And so anyway, so that was kind of the initial reason for it. And I desire actually to have a new iteration of Songs of Freedom, because now with all of this going on, I feel like this project could bring about a level of healing and a level of unity in ways that we didn't necessarily get to reach as many audiences before. So anyway, that's my little spiel.
Well, Abby Lincoln was quoted as saying, I gravitate to songs that help me to live.
Right.
And so she says, I'm going to sing these over and over. And so they become like a mantra, a prayer. And she's such a deep sort of spiritual center about, and of her own design that really guided her. And so I thought that was so insightful that, you do inhabit this music and it becomes you because you have to become it to do it. And
yeah, absolutely.
So I think that really resonates with what you said about the healing piece, that unification piece, because Nina was all about, freedom is no fear.
Right.
At the same time,
Right.
we have to, I think, all understand what that, for someone to be able to say that, that if you internalize what that means,
Right.
you have to wrestle with some pretty big things. So
Right.
I'm really really deeply touched that and pleased that you're saying that there's still life for the project, and that it means that there can be dialogue and discussion that could continue to happen from it.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting, I mean, which is why Miles and I are so incredibly grateful to you. There were a lot of, presenters who were really, they loved the idea. I mean, there was not one presenter that didn't love the idea. However, there were some that were scared because I think they were like, well, how is this going to be presented? However, I think this will have a new life because people are like, okay, we need to talk about it. And I think before it was that kind of thing where people were just like, oh, I would rather not because it's still very uncomfortable. Now it's made everybody uncomfortable. And if you're not talking about it, people are saying, well, what are you, like, if you're silent, that's also complicit, right?
Right.
Being complicit. So I think it's going to have another life because people are ready to have those dialogues. I mean, one of my dreams would be to do the show more, but then to your point, have a talk back and really have people voice their concerns. Because here's the thing, part of the problem that is happening, and it was happening with Nina and Abby, is that you have everybody being polarized, right? You got this one on that side and that one on that side. And when we come together, we're arguing versus we need to come together more. And the more we come together, then you understand me and I understand you. And then I'm not afraid of you. I'm not ashamed of you. And then we can do some good. But I'm hoping that this time we'll make that possible, not just through Songs of Freedom, but much larger with us, in a much larger way, having a dialogue.
Yeah. Well, I also think what was conceptually elegant about the way you designed it is, you incorporated Theo Blackman, who is a third stream player, right? I mean, he is an instrument himself, right? So he's and so it was for many, it could have felt like a really non sequitur choice, an out of bounds choice, but yet it opens the door to a whole different type of, here we are not even all the same in the way we approach this. And that openness and broadening of the palette was a huge conceptual signal. So beautiful.
Yeah. Well, that was a big deal for me, just to say briefly about Theo, because I remember, Alicia and I are very good friends. Initially, Dee Dee Bridgewater, who was part of it, obviously I've been a huge fan of hers. And then people were like, Theo Blackman, but I'd already had a lot of conversations with Theo where he was like, dude, I've checked, I got to see Betty Carter perform. I've gotten to know Abby and all that. So, and again, this is what we're talking about, bringing together people from different backgrounds. And now it's funny, like, a lot of the people in the band originally didn't know him. Now he's like, everybody's just crazy about it because Theo is, yes, he's like, quote unquote, as you say, third stream, but he is, to me, one of the most diverse, versatile musicians out there. He chooses to do what he does, but Theo can also dial it in and sing a beautiful jazz standard ballad if he had to,
Right.
But he's made a conscious effort to develop new concepts, and I wanted his energy a part of this project, and as as you said, he brought something really special.
Yeah. So I want to just ask you, it's kind of nice to follow the Songs of Freedom discussion. Is that one of the posts on your website that you wrote was really about the sort of role of meditative practice in dealing with anxiety. And I think as a society, we're wrestling with all kinds of anxieties and trying to be at peace with ourselves as well as with each other. And so, I'm curious about, to put your own meditative practice out in view. Those are conscious choices. So do you have any advice for folks who are wrestling with the anxieties of now?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the blog and all that and the writings were really about me kind of putting my money where my mouth was, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to keep telling people, as artists, we're vulnerable and we wear, our sleeve on our shoulder, but everything is so manicured and tapered. It's like, okay, dude, you're not practicing what you preach. So the blog was my exercise of that. And it actually brought a whole new audience. to your question about the anxiety, I think what I would say to people is, I always say there's a great singer. She's actually in the kind of pop R&B world. Her name is Her, like H.E.R.
Mhm.
And she has a song called "I'm Not Okay." And in the song, she talks about like, I'm not okay, and it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
And I think if there's anything that I can communicate with people now is it's okay to not be fine. It's okay to not to be like, I don't really want to get up today. It's okay to have those feelings, because I think part of what has gotten us here is that we've all had to act out, right? So I think first we need to acknowledge our truth of whatever that is, whatever is making us anxious, and not avoid it, because I think right now, if we avoid it, it's going to dig a deeper hole than we want, and we may not get out of it. So that's the first thing, is acknowledge it. And then I think we need to figure out what is the source of it, right? So is the source of it, for some that are not, Black Americans, their source is embarrassment, or their source is, hurt or disgust or shame, even that other people are doing this. Some is confusion, like, hey, I've never felt this way, so I'm confused. How could someone do this? Some is avoidance. Listen, this is so jacked up, I don't even want to deal with this, right? So I think we have to figure out where are we in that process, and then I think face it, and to your point, find whatever your meditative practice is. So for me, meditation and prayer has always been a way for me to find clarity. I would actually say meditation, prayer, and stillness, finding quiet spaces. So I think, with others, just acknowledge what's happening. It's okay to not be okay, but then how do you channel that? Because I think one of the things I'm seeing now is people are kind of getting stuck, right? And so they're on social media, and they're being stuck there. They're ranting out, and they're calling people out, and they're saying things, and you're not Black enough. If you're white, you should do this. Or if you're Indian, and it's just becoming a big cacophony of judgments. Versus, I think what we need to do is look inward and look at our individual selves and figure out, how do we just solve the problems that we're feeling within? And if all of us do that, then when we come together, we will be better. Versus me looking at you and telling you what you should do. That never felt good to me. I think we should take care of ourselves and make sure we're good, and those that are closest to us. And then we bring that work and that healing and that wholeness to the group. And then now the group is better because of what we've done individually. So those are a couple of things I would suggest.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate this chance to check in with you and celebrate the great work that you've brought to our community and the lives you've touched. I think there's a theme that kind of comes out of the role of being a percussionist that suits life, because you have to listen and be adaptable and collaborate in so many ways, and these are life skills. And so I think in many ways it's a really powerful lesson for all of us. And your example as a musician, as a producer, as a band leader, as a human, these are all really great for all of us to see and to be a part of, and to know that you've come and touched our community. So
thank you. It means the world that you let me share and let us share with you.
Well, that's great. Well, we wish you all the best. We know you've got some travels ahead with some more camps and some gigs, and we hope that your travels are safe, and all the journey and the musicianship is awesome. So I know that the audience is thrilled to encounter you. All right.
Well, thank you so much, man.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Okay, that's a wrap for this edition of the Convos Cultural Update. Again, special thanks to Ulysses Owens Jr. and Miles Weinstein and Rory Traynor of the amazing Unlimited Miles Agency for your help arranging this, and all of the other great artists that we've worked with you to bring to the Purdue community over the years. Okay, thanks again, be safe, and we'll see you again soon.